Face to face with any difficulty in life, there is a being of light ready to help you. Okay, just imagine genuinely believing that absolute guarantee for a second. It's like a promise that no matter the physical ailment or the sheer severity of whatever life struggle you're facing, a literal supernatural intervention is just waiting on standby, ready for your call to bring you total healing. It's an incredibly alluring, powerful mindset to inhabit, isn't it? Welcome to The Explainer. I'm your host, and today we're impartially unpacking a deeply rooted human desire that has literally spanned centuries. We're talking about supernatural healing, so let's dive right in. We're going to look closely at the modern appeal of faith healing, we'll examine what the scientific reality actually is, and then we'll break down the stark, sometimes tragic legal consequences that pop up when these belief systems crash head-on into modern medicine. Section 1. The Promise of Divine Touch. So to really see how this promise is packaged up for the modern consumer, let's look at a highly specific commercial artifact. For just $31.99 over at the bookstore Indigo, you can actually pick up a 128-page paperback called Divine Touch by Eric Dack. And the author claims that everything he writes comes directly from his own personal experience. Basically, the whole shebang of this book promises literal miracles through simple, proven means. It's actively selling the idea that invisible beings are close to you right now, always ready to answer your call and intervene in your actual physical reality. But what's truly fascinating here is the structured methodology the book teaches. We aren't just talking about passive belief. It's a step-by-step guide to becoming what the author calls an authentic channel of light. Step 1, you access the astral planes directly. Step 2, formulate your requests so they're literally imprinted in the astral. And Step 3, use specific techniques to enter the vibration of the planes of light. It's presented as a precise formula, sold to help you overcome absolutely any difficulty. Section 2. A global healing tradition. Now, if we zoom out from that single modern paperback for a second, we see that diverse cultures have practiced variations of this exact kind of religious healing for thousands of years. The ancient Greeks, for example, sought out the temples of Asclepius where they'd sleep, basically hoping the god of medicine would prescribe a treatment to them in a dream. Then in Islamic traditions, some healers focus on diagnosing possession by jinn. Over in Buddhism, proponents of the Guan Yin Sita Dharma door claim that reciting specific texts and mantras actively improves physical health. And of course, in Christianity, there's a rich history of supernatural healing, often involving the laying on of hands or anointing with oil, that dates all the way back to the New Testament. A really great example of balancing this demand for modern medicine with the belief in spiritual intercession is the Catholic Church's official stance. They actually recognize two different kinds of healing that aren't mutually exclusive. First, there's healing by human natural means, through the practice of science and medicine. In fact, the Church warns that prudence dictates we really shouldn't neglect science. But the other kind is healing by divine grace, interceded on behalf of the sick through prayer, the sacraments, or an appeal to the saints. Moving right along to Section 3, the scientific perspective. So this begs the question, if people are truly claiming to be cured by these spiritual methods, what in the world is actually happening to their bodies? Well, virtually all scientists dismiss faith healing as pseudoscience, basically pointing out a complete lack of biological plausibility. But believers often do genuinely feel better. So why is that? Skeptics neutrally explain this through phenomena like spontaneous remission or the placebo effect. This means a person might experience real pain relief or a decrease in their symptoms, not through any kind of mysterious supernatural function, but simply through the immense power of their own belief that they would be healed. The mind is powerful. However, the limits of these psychological effects are captured perfectly by a concept coined by Belgian philosopher Etienne Vermeersch. He called it the Lourdes effect, named after the super-famous Catholic healing shrine in France. Vermeersch basically pointed out the profound absence of prosthetic limbs among the piles of crutches left behind by believers. The key observation here is that claimed miracles are always sort of ambiguous, right? Like they might involve the remission of a tumor or chronic pain going away, but they never ever involve something biologically unambiguous, like, say, regenerating a severed arm. Let's turn to Section 4, Miracles for Sale. Historically, there's a darker side here, where some individuals have commercialized these beliefs through deliberate deception. We're talking about notorious 20th century healers like Smith Wigglesworth, William Branham, and Oral Roberts, who built these massive worldwide followings, drawing enormous crowds to tent revivals and eventually television screens. But skeptics point out that some people in this field engaged in outright fraud just to exploit credulous audiences. A really famous example is Peter Popoff. He pretended to receive divine revelations about audience members' illnesses, but in reality, no way.
He was wearing a hidden earpiece and receiving radio transmissions from his wife, who was reading prayer cards off stage.
And the real-world harm of these practices can be absolutely severe. Let me share a very specific, totally sobering anecdote from our sources. Back in 1955, a faith healer named Jack Coe told the parents of a 3-year-old boy that he had completely cured their son's polio. Coe instructed them to go ahead and remove the boy's leg braces. Well, the boy was not cured, and removing those medical devices left him in constant, agonizing pain. Coe was actually arrested in 1956 for practicing medicine without a license, and in a really tragic irony, Coe himself ended up contracting bulbar polio later that same year and died just weeks later.
Which brings us to our final part, Section 5, Faith, Medicine, and Law. This escalates the stakes significantly. What happens in the eyes of the state when parents actively choose prayer over medicine for critically ill children? Where does the law draw the line when a life is literally on the line? The legal records reveal a pretty heartbreaking timeline. In 2008, 11-year-old Karen Newman died of highly treatable diabetes because her parents prayed over her instead of rushing her to the hospital. They were convicted of reckless homicide. In 2012, 16-year-old Austin Creswell died of appendicitis while his parents just prayed for a week. They eventually pled guilty to negligent homicide. In 2022, 8-year-old Elizabeth Struess died in Australia after her religious group withheld her insulin. And in 2023, just recently, a 2-day-old infant named Hayden Edwards died in Oregon after his parents anointed him with oil instead of seeking medical help for his breathing problems.
Now, you might be wondering, how on earth could a parent rely solely on spiritual means without immediately facing child abuse charges? Well, the answer lies in a specific United States legal loophole. The 1996 CAPTA, that's the Child Abuse Prevention and Treatment Act, amendments stated that the federal government does not require a state to find abuse or neglect in cases where a parent relies solely or even partially upon spiritual means rather than standard medical treatment. And that single piece of legal phrasing leads to a pretty staggering reality. Exactly 31 U.S. states currently have child abuse religious exemptions on the books today. That's right, 31 states. And in 6 of those states, the exemptions even extend to murder and manslaughter. It creates this incredibly stark, chilling reality where the legal system attempts to balance a parent's deepest religious convictions against the basic welfare of a vulnerable child. So we've seen the allure of a $30 paperback promising miracles, the historic legacy of global healing traditions, the scientific realities of the placebo effect, and the truly devastating legal consequences of medical neglect. So I'll leave you with this final provocative thought to reflect on today. Where exactly do we draw the line between the freedom to believe and the right to survive? Thanks for exploring this with me on The Explainer. Keep learning, and I'll see you next time.